The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program, and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRC Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
Welcome to Spindle City Straight Talk. I'm Chip.
And I'm CJ.
And boy, have we got a lot of stuff to talk about today, as usual. Here we go. It's never sunny in the Riv.
No, it's not, and it's always funny, that's for sure. Hey, let's immediately get over to just a little bit of history before we go to our first breaking news story, which it really isn't breaking much anymore. In the 1970s, mid-1970s, inflation was high. And at that time, very significant financial analysts across the country, and actually across the world, had said that the American dream is dead. And that with the basis of our workforce going to service industry jobs, they cannot earn a living to keep them at the middle class. And the middle class was gone. Well, sadly enough, these experts, kind of like, Milton Friedman, were ignored. And guess what? The middle class is gone.
They were right.
So when you look at history, and the reason why I lead into this, because when you look at history, we repeat it every time. And you look at the history of Fall River, it's the same crap all over again. We can't get out of this mess. And no matter how many times we bring in the sewerage guy to dump out this cesspool, it fills up just as fast. So, and now we get into some real cesspool information.
Oh, this is, boy, if you guys, let everybody get ready, because if you want to get angry, this will make you angry.
The Fall River Housing Authority, is an interesting little body because they think that they're city employees. We know they're part of the city pension system, which I know just goes up your backside sideways, Chip. And it's scary when you think about it.
But they're untouchable because then, they're only city employees when they want to be.
Exactly.
And then they're not.
And they're a federal program. And the one thing about the federal government is they do not look highly or with mercy on sexual harassment or sexual misconduct. Yet, the Fall River Housing Authority Board held an executive session this past week and disciplined a gentleman by the name of Emilio Estacio, who was the assistant supervisor in the Housing Authority Operations Department. Now, this isn't this gentleman's first ride at the rodeo. He's been suspended numerous times before this suspension came out. And by the way, it's a retroactive suspension. And we have to ask ourselves why. Well, we've known for years that the Housing Authority is a political dumping ground for every political hack, kiss ass, or moron that exists. So let me get into how you get a job in the Fall River Housing Authority. You start looking at things like campaign finance reports.
Uh-oh.
So, when you get into campaign finance reports, you start laughing because Mr. Estacio, by the way, lists himself several times in several different positions because under OCPF regulations, you must list your job, who your employer is. Well, he's listed City of Fall River. He's listed Fall River Housing Authority. He's left it blank. And at one time he worked at Diamond Regional Voc High School as a teacher. I wonder how many students were sexually harassed. I don't know. I'm not making innuendo here. I'm just saying how many teachers there may have been harassed. But when we start looking at this, Kevin Aguiar, $150 total. Joe Camara, $150 total. Bob Correa, substantial amount of money. Bob Correa, $500, $700, $800, about $850. Carol Fiola, $475. Now here's the biggie.
Now here comes the biggie. Hold
Here
your
comes
hats,
the biggie.
everybody.
This is the gentleman who represented him on this action.
Hold your hats, gang.
William Flanagan, $4,400. Oops.
Oh, wowie. I hope he got a discount for legal fees.
I hope so too. Alan Garcia, $50. Tom Hodgson, $500. John Mitchell, $100. Walter Moniz, he was the low man on the total poll, by the way, $30.
Because he never wins anyway. Only you can't give him
Tim Murray, $150. Leo Pelletier, $120. Linda Pereira, $100. Paul Schmidt, $100. Alan Sylvia, $150. David Sullivan, a little over $1,900. Now, David Sullivan is now his direct boss, who oversaw this suspension, and
conflict of interest.
I would think so.
Foul. I'm yelling foul.
yeah, I would think so. Sam Sutter got $675, $425, and Paul Walsh got $550. I went all the way back to 2010, actually 2005, with this gentleman. I got the beginning of the records of his political campaign contributions. Now I have a problem, a serious problem. Dave Sullivan took money from him when he was running for state rep. And we can't stop people from donating money. But then he's his boss. Dave Sullivan got his job as an appointment from then Mayor Will Flanagan.
Who's also the guy's lawyer.
Who's also the guy's lawyer.
Wow.
Exactly. And
Nice.
all the members of this board, these commissioners, whatever they want to call themselves, except for one, were all appointed by Will Flanagan.
Who was the only one that wanted more disciplinary action.
So, I mean, when you're looking at this, you have to say to yourself, what are we doing? These are absolute conflict of interest. So, my question is, who's going to be the first one to the feds about this? Because this gentleman has been cited for improper procurement because he and another housing authority employee were giving contracts to people they had an interest in, like their brother-in-law, their businesses, et cetera, et cetera. You can't do that. That's a conflict of interest. Then he's had other complaints against him. Now, according to what was reported, he was allegedly escorted off housing authority property. Now, this is where your tax dollars are going. Again, political hacks. They get jobs. And then when they do wrong, or allegedly do wrong, they get a retroactive suspension without pay so they can keep their job. Now, again, let's go back to the 3-strike rule, all right? First strike, you got a 5-day suspension for procurement problems. Second strike was a complaint on sexual harassment. Third strike, another complaint on sexual harassment. Okay? And one of them wasn't even listed as sexual harassment. It was listed as poor judgment.
Well, that was, they pleaded it down. It was like, instead of getting first-degree murder, he took a plea of second-degree or manslaughter, and that's what they did. They did a plea deal. This is horrifying to think that a federal agency would allow someone like this to be employed.
Well,
the only reason he is, obviously, is because of campaign contributions. I mean, the fact is that he is in a supervisory position and he's harassing people sexually. He's used his position to get contracts for relatives, and he's still working. And we're looking at, I'm looking at the newspaper article, and it says that his lawyer, who, by the way, appointed or recommended for appointment Mr. Sullivan, and who got $4,000 in contributions from this guy, said, and I am quoting here, and my client is was pleased with the vote from the disciplinary hearing, and then he goes on to say that false allegations. Well, if he was pleased with the vote, getting a 90-day suspension, that's 3 months without pay. I guess he was guilty. So I guess the allegations weren't false, Will. I know you're a lawyer, and that was your plea that the allegations were false, but obviously, as a lawyer, you're obligated to represent your client's best interests. And if you really had a case, you wouldn't have got a 3-month, 25% of the year pay loss. You wouldn't have taken that deal if you could prove the allegations were false. This man has a long history, 6 years. And you're right, CJ. I mean, the feds have to be contacted on this thing. This again shows how disgustingly political things are. And I know they're political everywhere, but in Fall River, we redefine politics. I mean, you just look at this. Everybody involved in this fundamentally was in a conflict of interest. Or at least it could be perceived, and even if there's the perception of a conflict, you should consider it a conflict. Now, most of those board members were recommended for appointment by probably Will Flanagan.
Correct.
And the director of the Housing Authority was recommended for his job, which, by the way, if we all remember correctly, everybody said he wasn't qualified for, and the state corroborated that and said he wasn't. And they made him go take, ridiculous state classes so they could rubber stamp him like they always do and justify another political appointment. So you have the director of the Housing Authority who took almost $2,000 worth of contributions
Yes.
from him, and who was given the job by the attorney representing this guy, who got $4,000 in campaign contributions when he was the mayor. I mean, this is like inbred Jed. I feel like I'm down in Alabama. I mean, what is this?
The Appalachian Mountain Trail.
What did they say after this hearing was completed? Did they all look at each other and say, "Hey, if we get married, he is still my brother after I get divorced"? I don't know. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Well,
I mean, this is. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. I mean, this was probably the greatest meeting of political hacks in the last 6 months. I mean, everybody there had a vested interest in this guy. He gave money to virtually everybody.
Well, that's how you keep your job. That's how you keep your job.
6 years. I mean, the only guy who voted against this, who wanted further disciplinary action, was one who preceded this and wasn't. Said Commissioner Scott Charette was the sole member to reject Sullivan's recommendation during the closed hearing, and said he arrived at the decision after speaking with staff from the Housing Authority. He said he was aware of Estachio's suspension in 2010. I do my due diligence more than most people, Charette said. Well, 2010, last time I checked it was 2016. This guy has been working there for another 6 years after 2 instances. One where he procured contracts for a relative, which, by the way, is malfeasance at best, and illegal, and a crime at worst. So, although malfeasance is a crime technically too. But, the fact is, this is just, again, you ask why I tell you to stay angry. This is why. This is what goes on in Fall River in the back rooms all the time. Not just in this instance, in TIF deals, in every political dealing. And this is why we got to break the cycle. We've got to break the cycle by imposing term limits on everybody. And we have to rise up and scream when people are appointed to positions, when they leave the State House and get jobs in a housing authority they're not qualified for. Well, you can't get a job in the city of Fall River. We can't pay our bills. We're the poorest city in the state. And this stuff goes on? I want to know what his salary is. We have to research that.
I can get that in 5 minutes.
That's right. And we're going to get it. And we're going to tell you on the next show what his salary is. Because this is, this is just crazy. I mean, obviously, it's going to continue because if all you ever do, you never get fired. It's like, it's illegal to fire a politically connected person. If somebody who didn't give to all these people, well, number one, most of them wouldn't be working in a housing authority if they weren't making contributions. But let's say, for the sake of argument, somebody got a job because they didn't know somebody. They would have been suspended for 90 days on the first offense. They might have been terminated on that first offense when you're getting contracts for a relative. They might have been, summarily executed and put out to pasture. But look, 6 years later, this guy's still in the system, and he'll serve his 90-day suspension, and he'll come back, and he'll do it again, because guess what? I don't think he believes he's untouchable. This is the worst that's ever going to happen to him.
But and
I sympathize with the person who was on a receiving end of that harassment. And if I were them, whoever he or she is, I'd file a suit against the housing authority.
Right. And the thing is, in the general business community, in the private sector, if you are accused of sexual harassment, you're usually terminated. They don't even have to prove it 9 out of 10 times. They just say that just the accusation is enough to put you in a position where we don't want to have you.
And for the sake of saying government turns its head, it doesn't. It's the people in government, because there is a zero tolerance policy.
Yes, there is.
For sexual harassment on all levels of government. I know it was mandatory for us to go over that policy periodically on the fire department. They had to take a course in sexual harassment. They saw videos on what constitutes. As a matter of fact, the former chief was sued for harassment and lost. The fact is that, look, there's a zero tolerance, but that policy is only good if, in fact, we abide by a zero tolerance.
Yeah, and in conversations last night with several learned people, in other words, lawyers outside of the city of Fall River, they all said that this might be a DOJ complaint.
And I agree.
Okay, so I'm wondering who's going to go beat down the doors to the Department of Justice and the Housing and Urban Development, because this is questionable. And I'm really tired of it. But while we're on government, let's move into the next line of fire. For people who don't know, this is Sunshine Week. We haven't had much of it this week in the city. But Sunshine Week is about open government, transparency in government. And as many people know, my name is quite well known at the Office of Open Meeting Complaints in the State House. And on March 15th, an article was written by a gentleman by the name of Brian Hunhoff, Hunhoff. He writes for the Yunkin County Observer in Yankton, South Dakota.
Wow.
Okay.
He's got nothing better to do in South Dakota.
Now, interestingly enough, he said something, and by the way, I emailed this out to every city councilor, every school committee member. I emailed it out to Kathy Ann Viveris. I mailed it out to Joe Macy. I mailed it out to Bruce Assad. I mailed it to Allison and Inez. So the entire city has this article just to read. And I'll get into the comments in a few moments. But there's the 10 Commandments, as he calls it, for open meetings. And I'm only going to go into the 10 Commandments. 1, do not gather as a quorum outside of regular meetings, and do not hold special meetings without giving at least 24 hours public notice. How often does our city government violate that?
No, but you didn't read this in little tiny print that you need you need a microscope. It says except in Fall River.
Except in Fall River, exactly.
Okay.
Number 2, do not habitually add last-minute items to the agenda, and do not act on anything not listed on the posted agenda. Our city council does that every meeting. 3, do not abuse the litigation excuse for executive session to speculate about possible or imagined lawsuits. 4, do not stretch the personnel excuse for executive sessions to discuss policy issues. Example, creating a new position or changing a department's job description and policy decisions and not appropriate topics for closed meetings. 5, do not dial up the negotiations excuse to suddenly exclude the public from discussions of controversial issues that were previously aired through its open session. 6, do not allow executive session conversations to stray to other topics. 7, do not violate the spirit of the open meeting law with the frequent phone, email, or text dialogues with other members. Reach consensus at the meeting. 8, do not make a habit of whispering or passing notes at meetings. You were elected to speak for us. Tell what you have to say out loud and proud. Allow public input at every meeting. Include it on every agenda. That's number 9. Okay, and 10, be as transparent as possible. Do not hold executive sessions simply because counsel advised it is legal to do so. Ask yourself, is it absolutely critical we discuss this privately? Well, guess what? Every one of those 10, our city council, our school committee, and our city government violate regularly. You do not have the right to know anything.
As a matter of fact, they make a conscious effort to do it exactly the opposite of most of these rules.
Exactly.
Because, you know, I'm looking at number 7, do not violate the spirit of the open meeting law with frequent phone calls, text, but they like to call each other, meet with each other, and have our new council wants to have everything decided before they ever get to the chamber. And they don't understand, as he said very clearly, you know, you're there to represent us. Be transparent. You know, and, you know, it's just, when you see this, and it's, you know, it's just common sense, but when we look at the bottom line, what is this thing saying? It's saying that, well, the politicians have completely forgotten that they're there to represent us. Damn the Massachusetts Constitution that says that at all times they'll be answerable to us. Damn the Constitution of the United States. And damn the public. Once we're elected, we get to do whatever we want, when we want it, how we want it, and that's the way it is. And if you don't like it, tough. Well, I think that's one of the reasons that we saw last night Donald Trump, with all the consternation and all the issues and all the problems, supposedly, they're doing everything they can to destroy him. You know, he again, I mean, he destroyed Marco Rubio in his own state. Not that Rubio didn't contribute to that with his totally inane dialogue on most issues. He proved he was an empty suit, I think, to many people. I mean, he barely got 25% of the vote in his own state, and from his own party. You know, but people are angry. And, you know, this guy's writing an article in South Dakota. We're complaining here in Fall River. We've had recalls. We've done things in Fall River. But people throughout this country are finally beginning to realize, and it takes a lot. You got to shovel a lot of crap before everybody's eyes turn brown.
Yeah, you know, but the thing is,
and they are disgusted with it. And this is the reason that Donald Trump is getting the traction he's getting. People don't want a political insider. They have no trust any longer in any politician.
But the funny thing is that I received a couple of comments, and I'm not going to call out their names because they thought it was a joke. I received a comment from one elected official who turned around and says, "Oh, well, I better stop that because I do that all the time. Normally, I'm whispering across the table going, 'What page are we on?'" You know, I mean, this is a serious issue, okay? And, you know, you get another one who turns around and says, "That's not from Massachusetts. That doesn't apply to us." Honestly?
Well, I guess, yeah, but the Constitution of the state does that says that.
No, that doesn't apply to anybody either. You know that, Chip. Come on. You know, the thing that really frustrates me is the fact that as much as we try to educate our public, you and I, Patrick Higgins, several other people come forward and we try to educate our elected officials. Comments have been made to us, not only by corporate counsel for the city, but by the school committee, that, we're doing this to make things difficult. I received communications in regards to an open meeting law complaint that corporate counsel has never given advice that would violate the open meeting law. He believes in transparency. And honestly, I believe that Joe Macy does do that. But when you have City Councilor Linda Pereira and other city councils saying, corporate counsel said just to receive it and place it on file, that's not what the law says. The law says you must discuss the issue. Now, the school committee discusses it in closed session. They don't want anyone to know about it. And the city council doesn't discuss it at all. Then how can you come to a solution to an open meeting complaint that way?
Well, because you discuss an open meeting in a non-open meeting,
right,
in a secret meeting. So there you go. There's the great logic of politicians, and this is one of the problems that we have in our government, and this is the reason that, unfortunately, we have a process, and that process is not perfect, and what we have to do is continually now doing what we're doing in this election. Getting outsiders in until we get the outsiders that finally occupy these positions that are no longer going to make this their own little playpen. We're not going to have situations where housing authorities consider themselves exempt from federal and state law, and can do the kind of things you do. This has got to end. We can't have people who were part of this entire process and getting these people their jobs and getting everybody involved in their jobs, and not say there's a perception, if not a conflict of interest. It's about fairness, and the problem is people can condemn the concept of unions, but unions were created for one thing, to protect the workers who weren't connected. It was to protect everybody, give everybody an equal playing field, having a grievance process, having something that's not biased. If this hearing and the people involved in this hearing, as far as I'm concerned, virtually everybody except the guy who voted against this disciplinary action should have recused themselves from this entire process and given it to somebody else.
I agree. But the thing that gets me is, we as citizens have a right, an inalienable right. And our government continually tries to take that away from us. When we brought potential legislation to our city council, they've come up with every excuse under the sun on why they can't do it, why they can't hear it. You know what? It was even said to me that even if you pass this, even if you get this made into legislation, we don't have to do it. Our government can violate our own ordinances?
Yeah, I guess so. So that's another great illogical response. That, well, what they're basically telling you is, we don't care what the laws are. We don't care if you even pass new laws. That we're just going to ignore the ones we don't agree with, and we're going to just do what we want. And that's not what they were elected to do. They have completely lost sight of the fact that they're here to represent us.
No, we don't have, this is like the Democratic Party. Well, this is a representative government. Give me a break.
Stay angry, especially if you get sexually harassed.
Have a great day.